Welcome to Unit 8. Today we're going to continue with modal logic, and then we'll finish it the next time and get further into informal fallacies, which we started last time. And before doing this unit, I suggest that you do a few modal logic problems, and then we'll go through them, and you'll see if you got them right. And then read ahead on informal fallacies, and try to master the Logicola modal proofs if you haven't done so already. Okay, so you should be getting pretty comfortable with modal logic proofs at this point. For inference rules, first thing you do is reverse squiggles. So if you have not necessary, you move to possible not, or not possible, necessarily false. These you use whenever you can if the whole line begins with a not and then a box or diamond. The rest of it can be more complicated. And then you start the step and henceforth forget it. Then you look for diamonds to drop. It's got to be an initial diamond of the whole formula, of the whole line. And you drop it and put the formula in a new world. When you drop a diamond, always use a new world, one that you haven't used before. So the first one you drop, it'll be world W, and then the second one, WW, and the third one, WWW, and so forth. Each of these represents kind of a story which would make a certain possibility true. And the last thing to do is to drop boxes. Necessary A, therefore A is true in all possible worlds, so you can put it where you want. But it's not good strategy to move into new worlds. Always use old worlds, use every world with a W, and sometimes use the actual world without any W's. You want to do that if there's no other worlds, or if you have a letter without any modal operator in the original argument. Okay. Number 9. This is a very perplexing argument. It's perplexing because it uses one modal operator within the scope of another. And we mentioned, I think last time, that this can bring about controversies and issues. And so this one is valid with a question mark. There's some sort of dispute on whether it's valid, which is kind of unusual in logic. Usually, whether an argument is valid or invalid is pretty clear, but there might be arguments about the truth of the premises. Okay, this is an argument for the existence of God as a necessary being. It goes back way to St. Anselm of the early Middle Ages, and it has a contemporary defender in Charles Hartshorne, and it's based on the difference between necessary beings and merely contingent beings. A contingent being is something that exists but needn't have existed. We could consistently imagine it not existing. Like your computer is a contingent being. It exists, but it might not have existed. Now, we can perhaps conceive the notion of a necessary being. What would that be? One that exists of logical necessity. If it exists at all, it exists of inherent necessity. And we might not initially know whether there are such necessary beings, but according to Hartshorne, we can say that it's necessary that if there is such a being, a necessary being, that it exists of inherent necessity. And that's the first premise there. And he says, this is just true by virtue of what we mean by a necessary being. It's necessary that if there is a necessary being at all, then it's inherently necessary that there is. I warn you, this is kind of difficult. The second premise he thinks is somewhat arguable is the idea of a necessary being consistent. and he identifies this rightly or wrongly with God. So is the idea of God consistent? He thinks it is, but he thinks that you could dispute that. But if you don't, then it follows that there's a necessary being. Or does it? Well, um, depends on what system of logic you use. Again, this one's kind of tricky. Let me do the proof. There's one step which is maybe controversial, and it uses one of the rules in a way we haven't used it before, and that's the problem. So let's try to prove it. So assume the opposite. Assume not necessary, and then possible not n, and then we have two diamonds to drop. So let's put one in world W. We got n, and world WW we got not n. Again, when you drop a diamond, you got to use a new world. Then put the box in both worlds. I'm not going to put it in WW though, because you're not going to be able to get anything. The one where you're going to get something is world W. So it's true in all possible worlds, therefore it's true in world W. If n, then necessary n. But in world W, you have n, and if n, then net box n, therefore in world W, you got box n. Now, can we go from this into world WW? Well, we've never done that before. We've never gone from a necessary thing in a world W into putting the thing in another world. But let's say you can. Then you'll say, in all possible worlds, you have n. Therefore, in world WW, you have n. So we go like this. And then you get a contradiction. WW has n, not n. And there you go. So block it off, and you get a contradiction. Therefore, it's valid. Therefore, necessary and valid. But let's put a question mark, because this step here, where you go from necessary n in a world W to n in a world WW, this some systems would not accept. I noted that there's differences of opinion when you have one modal operator within the other. So this is true in some systems, but not in others. So the peculiar thing about this argument is that to defend it, you need to do more than just defend the premises. You also have to defend a system of logic. Even so, have you proved the existence of God? Well, suppose you prove a necessary being. The conclusion there, that there's a necessary being is logically necessary. Does that prove that there's a God? Not necessarily. Maybe this necessary being is a prime number or something like that. You need a little bit more, that it's like a personal being and has knowledge and goodness and so forth, the attributes of God, and created the world. So now there is a beefed up version of this argument from Alvin Plantinga, which I think is pretty plausible. But unfortunately for us, that's in the following chapter, which we're not going to get into. It's about advanced modal systems. Okay. Hope that all hasn't confused you too much. It's kind of introducing an issue that's kind of an advanced issue that we're not going to deal with any further. Okay. This is another philosophical one. And it goes back to the ancient world, Aristotle and the Stoics. And it's an argument for fatalism, that whatever happens, happens of inherent necessity, so we can't be free. So we're not free. Let's say that there's an event that's going to happen tomorrow or not. You're going to go outside or you're not going to go outside. Aristotle used the example of a sea battle which would occur. Let's say you're thinking of having a sea battle, I don't know, against your neighbors or something. Put water on their porch or something like that. So you will do it or you won't. That's necessary. Necessary that you'll do it or you won't do it. So therefore, we might think one or the other is necessary. Necessary that you'll do it or necessary that you won't do it. But if it's necessary that you do it, then you're not free. You act of necessity, not of free will. And since it's necessary that you won't do it, then again you're not free. So either way, you're not free. Therefore, you're not free. And there you go. That was much just debated in the ancient world. Can we prove that there's no freedom, that everything is determined, everything is fated? Well, the Stoic philosopher Chrysippus, who was a pretty good logician actually, said that the argument isn't really valid. The problem is you can't go from it's necessary that D or not D, therefore either it's necessary that D or it's necessary that not D. That does not work. It doesn't distribute that way. That's like arguing, he said, everything is either A or not A, therefore either everything is A or everything is not A. Or more simply, everyone is male or female, therefore either everyone in the world is male or everyone in the world is female. This does not work. And indeed, if you try to prove it, it comes out invalid. So assume the opposite, F, then we can deny the second part, deny the first part. So you get not necessary D, and you get not necessary not D, denying the second part here. And so you have possible not D and possible D. And then you have in world W, you have not D, drop the diamond into new world. Drop this diamond, it's got to go into another world. So you have D. So you have two possible worlds. One in which you don't do it, and the other in which you do it. Ooh, okay, let's see. Now, you could drop the box into both worlds, but I'm going to skip that because you're not going to get anything new. So, are the premises true and conclusion false? Yes. Every world has D or not D, right? This one has D, this one has not D. So that's true. If every world has D, well, false. Implies anything is true. Everything has not D, every world has not D, false. Not F, well, we need an actual world in which you're free. So, yeah, this one here. So that would be true, not true is false. So you'd have, oh, pardon me. That's true. So you have true premises, false conclusion. Therefore, invalid. As Chrysippus said, this is not a good way to argue against free will. There's a lot of modal arguments that aren't very good arguments on free will and predestination and determinism and stuff like that. We'll see another one later, the divine foreknowledge human freedom argument, which is my favorite one. Okay. This is an argument about determinism. Some philosophers believe in determinism, that everything we do was determined or causally necessitated by prior events. But they say we have you can still praise an agent or not. Or how does that argument go? This agent's actions are all determined is consistent with I describe the agent's character in an approving way. Okay, you could say everything, all the actions of this person are determined, but it still describe the character in an approving way. I describe the agent's character in an approving way is consistent with I praise the agent. Therefore, this agent's actions were all determined is consistent with I praise the agent. This comes out to be invalid. To make it valid, the second premise should say that it's necessary that if I describe the agent's character in an approving way, then I praise the agent, which is pretty plausible. That makes it a valid argument. Why didn't I give you the valid argument? I had too many valid ones. I needed more invalid ones. So there's kind of with a slight reformulation, this becomes a pretty good argument. But as it is, not so. So how do you disprove it? Assume the opposite. Not possible, therefore necessary, not D and P. That's a dot. Okay. Then you drop the diamonds. Each one goes into a new and different world. So you have the first one there, possible DNA. So you put DNA in world W, and you can simplify it if you want. Therefore D, therefore A. And let's put this one in another column over here. Just make it a little neater. So possible A and P, therefore in another possible world, you get A and P, and star these. Therefore, in world W, you got A true, and world W, you got P true. Okay, then you want to drop the box in both worlds. So every world has not both D and P, therefore world W has not both D and P, and world WW has not both D and P. And then this one, you got D, therefore not P. And this one you have, they're not both true. The P is, therefore the D is not. So you get WW, not D. I don't know if this is helpful or more confusing, but whatever. Okay, so you get no contradiction. You get D true in one world and false in another, but again, that's not a contradiction. So how do you disprove it? Well, you have a world W and a world WW. And the world W, you have D, A, and not P. And in a world WW, you have P, A, and not D. Then you evaluate the premises and conclusions. Possible DNA. Some possible world has DNA. True. It's possible that A and P, right. Some world has that. Therefore, there's a world with D and P both. Not there, not there, not anywhere. So you have premises true and conclusion false. Therefore, invalid. Okay. This last model we're going to do today is about materialism. which is one form of it says that apparent mental events are really just chemical brain processes. That's all. Thinking, hoping, loving, desiring, feeling are uh, um, are just chemical brain processes. So, first premise says if thinking is just a chemical brain process, then I think entails there's a chemical process in my brain. And that should be a period here. Okay. So, thinking is just a chemical brain process, then I think logically entails there's a chemical process in my brain. Oh God, did I screw this one up? There's a chemical process in my brain entails I have a body. I think but don't have a body is logically consistent, which is this one. Therefore, thinking isn't just a chemical brain process. Let me say something about this third premise. I think but don't have a body is logically consistent. Sometimes people appeal to movies of out-of-body experiences to show that the idea of thinking without a body is consistent. Now, my favorite movie about out-of-body experiences is The Flatliners. And this was starring Julia Roberts and Kiefer Sutherland and all that sort of thing. And it was shot in part on Loyola's campus years ago. I remember it. You had Julia Roberts and all these big stars, and the campus was supposed to be a hospital. And what you had is these medical students would do near-death experiments where they would stop their heart and stop the blood to the brain, and there was a flat line, meaning no brain functions. But they would have experiences then, and they would come back and talk about, like a judgment or just all kinds of interesting things. There are such experiences that people relate. I mean, um, there's a whole history of near-death experiences. Very interesting. We could get into it further, but that's more another course. But here, let's just note that that's some sort of evidence that I think but don't have a body is logically consistent. That you could have a movie in which this happens. So anyway, this is valid. All kinds of questions and issues about it, but it is valid. Let's prove it real quickly. Assume J, and then you can use that with the first premise. Necessary T implies C, and then you drop the diamond in a new world. In world W, you have T and not B, and you can simplify that. World W, you got T. World W, you got not B. And then in every world, if you have C, then you have B. C implies B. So you get that from here, but not B. Therefore, not C. And then you have every world has if T, then C. Therefore, world W has if T, then C. But T in world W, therefore C in world W, and you get a contradiction. So it is valid, not J. Very controversial, though. I mentioned the Flatliner movies throughout. There are questions and debates about the afterlife and about whether we survive death and whether there's a God and whether it's a very, very interesting and provocative movie. Plus, you see all kinds of scenes of the Loyola campus. That's kind of cool. Okay, so that's enough modal uh, arguments. We will finish modal logic next time. We'll do a couple of more problems, and then um, we'll focus entirely on informal fallacies for the rest of the course. Now, what are informal fallacies? Well, we started that last time. These are common errors of thinking, and we're going to study 18 of them, and then we will consider little examples and ask what fallacy is committed by such and such an example. So you got to basically learn these categories. So what's a circular argument? One where you assume the truth of what has to be proved, or you use A to prove B and then B to prove A. Ambiguous is where you change the meaning of a term or phrase within an argument. Appeal to emotion is where you stir up emotions, maybe use derogatory language instead of arguing in a logical way. Beside the point is where you argue for a conclusion irrelevant to the issue at hand. Like, let's say you're debating an issue and you give an argument for something which isn't really related. Straw man or scarecrow is where you misrepresent an opponent's view. We talked about those last time, the first 5. The next group, appeal to the crowd. You argue that a view must be true because most people believe it. Okay. Most people believe that Wheaties cereal is very nutritious. Therefore, Wheaties cereal is very nutritious. Not a good argument. Maybe most people are wrong. We're inclined to go along with the crowd, but the fact that most people believe something doesn't show that it's true at all. Opposition. We argue that a view must be false because our opponents believe it. So we say those dirty Republicans say this, therefore it's false, or those dirty Democrats say it, therefore it's false. Well, not good reasoning. Our opponents might be right about something, and we're just closed-minded if we eliminate that possibility. The genetic fallacy is where you argue that your view must be false because we explain why you hold it. So we can say, well, we can explain your political views or religious views in terms of how you were brought up. Therefore, your views are false or unsupported or something else, well, not good reasoning. To show that the views are false, you have to attack the views. It doesn't suffice to say how you came to get the views. Maybe you came originally to believe in certain things because of your upbringing, but you later came to back it up more. So maybe you have firm knowledge about it, even though originally you came to believe it under those reasons. Appeal to ignorance is arguing that a view must be false because no one has proved it. So you argue that there can't be a God because no one has proved that there is. Or if you argue that no one has proved that there's no God, so therefore there has to be a God, neither is very good. This isn't where you are ignorant about something. It's where the premise says that no one has proven something, and the conclusion is it's false or unreasonable or something like that. This is one with Latin. Post hoc ergo propter hoc. There's a lot of Latin in logic and also in the law. If you want to be a lawyer or a medical doctor, a lot of Latin there too. A lot of Latin all over the place. Anyway, post hoc ergo propter hoc. This means after this, therefore because of this. You argue that since A happened after B, thus A was caused by B. an example, I use the example of Paul, who used to have a beer before his logic tests, and then he got 104 on it with, I gave certain bonus points. So you say he had a beer before the logic test, then he got 104, therefore he got 104 because he had a beer. And therefore, if I have a beer before my logic test, I will get 104 also. Or if I have a six-pack, then I'll get 624% or something else. Not very good reasoning. The part-whole fallacy is where you argue that what applies to the parts must apply to the whole, or vice versa. So you say, I made cookies. Suppose I made cookies. I never made cookies in my entire life, I'm embarrassed to say, but suppose I use excellent ingredients. Therefore, my cookies are going to be excellent? Not necessarily. Maybe I don't know how to put them together. Or maybe you're an expert at making cookies. You make delicious, wonderful cookies. Therefore, the ingredients are excellent. Well, maybe not. Maybe you do great things with rather mediocre ingredients. Okay. The next group here has good forms and bad forms. Appeal to authority can be legitimate or illegitimate depending on how you do it. If you appeal to genuine authorities on a topic, and people who have studied it, who have firm background, and there's a consensus of such authorities, then they're probably right. And that has to be given some weight. Doesn't prove that they're necessarily right. You could have all the authorities in the world agree on something, as they frequently have, and then they would turned out to be wrong. So, for example, is milk good for you if you have ulcers? At one time, all the authorities agreed yes, and then they found out no. So you can't say the authorities agree, therefore it must be true. You can say it's probably true, what we should accept unless we have further evidence. Another way you can violate, have a bad appeal to authority, is if you appeal to someone who is not an authority on that issue. For example, if you appeal to what Gensler says about logic, well, I am an authority. If you appeal to what I say about fashion, no. So you got to appeal to people that are genuine authority on the issue and find a consensus of such people and conclude that they're probably right. And if any of those are violated, you say they have to be right. You say that appeal to people where there's a difference of opinion among the experts, or you appeal to someone that isn't an expert in the field. That's a bad appeal to authority. Ad hominem, another Latin one. This means against the person, as opposed to ad rem, which is against the topic. So this is a personal attack where you improperly attack the person instead of the view. And again, ad hominems could be legitimate. If you say you're inconsistent, therefore your view isn't very reasonable. Or if you can say you're ignorant of the facts, therefore your view isn't very reasonable. Those are legitimate ways of criticizing the reasonableness of a person's view. What would be an improper ad hominem, where you appeal to something that has nothing to do with their rational competence? For example, some of the Nazis said that Einstein's views on physics have to be wrong because he was Jewish. Well, the fact that he was Jewish had nothing to do with his rational competence. That would be a really bad ad hominem. Or if you say you're ignorant or inconsistent, therefore your views are wrong, they still might be right. And pro-con is a one-sided appeal to advantages and disadvantages. Again, pro-con reasoning can be good or bad depending on how you do it. Let's say I'm buying a sleeping bag, and there are two that I'm deciding between, sleeping bag A and sleeping bag B. One way of trying to make the choice, and this was suggested by Benjamin Franklin actually, is to fold a piece of paper and give advantages and disadvantages for one and the other. So maybe this sleeping bag keeps you warmer, and maybe that's important, or maybe it's not very durable, or whatever. So you look at the two possibilities and say, what are the advantages or disadvantages? That's often a very good way to reason about things. Let's say you're thinking about going to a law school, and you want to choose between A and B. Well, fold a piece of paper, look for advantages and disadvantages. And do you count how many items? No, you look for the weight of the important advantages. What would be a bad version of the pro-con? Well, you just look for the good points or just look for the bad points, and don't look on both sides. So you should do this sleeping bag because it's lighter. Well, that's one thing, but you gotta look at the whole picture of advantages or disadvantages. Otherwise, it's the fallacy. Okay, and then four more. Black and white thinking oversimplifies by assuming that one of two extremes must be true. So for example, if I say students are either athletes or scholars, but you couldn't be both. You're either this or that, you couldn't be both. You could be both, or neither, or one to any degree or the other to any degree. Those are not opposites. So black and white thinking, you're this or that. You're logical and emotional. Or emotional, you can't be both. You can be both. You can be neither. You can be any logical or emotional to any degree and the other to any degree. They're not opposites. False stereotype is where you assume that the members of a certain group are more alike than they are. For example, if I say all Notre Dame fans are drunks, well, they're not all drunks. No. Now that's called the fallacy of accent, where you don't exactly say something false, but you insinuate it. You say they're not all drunks. You're kind of insinuating that most of them are. So does this list of fallacies give all of them? No. So false stereotype. This is true especially of racism and discrimination, and all white people are this, all Chinese are this, all Polish are this, all Muslims are this, all people are a lot more diverse, and the false stereotype kind of oversimplifies. Okay, appeal to force. Using threats or intimidation to get a conclusion accepted. So I said, well, you better accept that Michigan will beat Ohio State or you'll flunk. Okay, that would be an appeal to force. And our last one is a complex question. You ask a question that assumes the truth of something false or doubtful. The classic example is, are you still beating your wife? Okay, yes or no. If you say yes, you used to beat your wife. If you say no, you're not still beating your wife. Well, you used to. Yeah, you're in trouble if you answer it yes or no. And in the court of law, that's called leading the witness or something like that, and that would be objected to. So the question sometimes assumes something which is false or doubtful, and then it's a complex question. Are you still beating your wife? One good way of learning these things is to think of a clear example for each of them, and have that kind of in mind. Otherwise, you just have a bunch of 18 categories and maybe not real clear what's what. But think of a complex question. Are you still beating your wife? Whatever. Okay, so there's 18 categories, and just to make the exercises kind of easier, I have a 2-letter abbreviation for each of them. And this is used in Logicola too, where you have a lot of examples, and then you got to figure out, what fallacy is committed. Sometimes it's more than one fallacy is committed by an example, and sometimes it's kind of controversial whether a fallacy commits, whether an example commits a certain fallacy. This is not as clear-cut as the formal stuff. It is the formal stuff, if A then B, not B, therefore not A, is pretty precise, pretty non-controversial. Well, except what we saw an example in modal logic earlier where it wasn't. But usually, this stuff is not as clear cut. The Logicola ones are set R, and you have 120 examples, and these are randomly selected. So it doesn't kind of create random examples. You really can't do that very well with fallacy. So you have them, and you're supposed to identify what they are. Let's do 3 examples from the book, and then I'll have you do some, and then we'll come back and check it. Okay, these are from page 60. Number 1 says, are you still wasting time with all that book learning at the university? Let's say your very anti-intellectual uncle asks you that. Are you still wasting time with all that book learning at the university? What is that? That's a complex question that assumes that you're studying and that's a waste of time, that building your mind is a waste of time. If you say, no, I'm not still wasting time, or yes, I am, you're assuming that developing your mind is a waste of time. That's a complex question. 2, the Bible tells the truth because it's God's word. We know that the Bible is God's word because the Bible says so and it tells the truth. This is circular. A is true, therefore B is true. B is true, therefore A is true. And so that would be circular. Would it be an appeal to authority? There's a hint of that, but circular is really better because it fits. A is true, therefore B is true. B is true, therefore A is true. People sometimes want to give justifications for all their beliefs. Eventually you have to say, well, I just considered this. This is what I think. And not give, bad reasons. Number 3, you should vote for this candidate because she's intelligent and has much experience in politics. And you say, that sounds pretty good. But if that's all you knew, would you vote for her? Maybe, maybe not. You'd have to look at the negatives. She has the positive things. Does she have negative things? This is the pro-con fallacy. Maybe she's a crook. This is the beginning of a pro-con argument. You compare her with her opponent. Maybe the opponent is more intelligent, has more experience. So you've got to look at kind of the whole picture. Okay, these are a little tricky at first, but you'll get better at them. Now, I'd like you to do the next few fallacies, 4 through 10, again, from the book on page 60. and I think it slides into 61. Why don't you go through these, click pause, go through these, identify them, and then click play, and you can come back and get the answers. Okay, number 4. The Equal Rights Amendment was foolish because its feminist sponsors were nothing but braless bubbleheads. This is kind of a silly one. It commits lots of fallacies. Ad hominem is one thing. You attack the people, and you conclude that their view is wrong. You attack them on grounds having nothing to do with their rational competence. Appeal to emotion. You're using rather insultive language instead of giving an argument. False stereotype, where all the supporters of the Equal Rights Amendment braless bubbleheads. Well, many of them had PhDs and were even male or wore bras. And, this was huge false stereotype. 5. No one accepts this theory anymore, so it must be wrong. This is really appeal to the crowd. Most people believe A, therefore A, or most people believe not A, therefore not A. 6, either you favor a massive arms buildup or you aren't a patriotic American, black and white. Maybe you're in the middle. Maybe you're against a massive arms buildup, but you are a patriotic American. You just don't think we need any more bombs, and we can put the money to greater use. So this would be black and white. Either you're this or that. Well, maybe you are both. Okay, number 7. The president's veto was the right move. In these troubled times, we need decisive leadership, even in the form of opposition. We should all thank the president for his courageous move. So this one is really beside the point. What you got to prove is that it was the right move, not that it was courageous. Maybe it was courageous, but stupid. And also, there's probably a bit of appeal to emotion there, too. So, and number 8 says each member of the team is unbeatable. Therefore, the team must be unbeatable. This would be the part-whole fallacy. Maybe each member of the team is really good, but they don't work together. And so maybe there's another team with kind of average people of athletic ability, but they work together really well. So this is the part-whole fallacy. 9, my doctor told me to lose weight and give up smoking, but she's overweight smoker herself, so I can safely ignore her advice. This is ad hominem. She's inconsistent, therefore her views are wrong. Well, maybe her views are right, and she just needs to follow it herself. Belief in God is explained in terms of one's need for a father figure, so it's false. This is genetic fallacy. To show that the view is false, you have to attack the view and not talk about how you got the view. Maybe people, this is kind of the Freudian explanation of why people believe in God. You want a big daddy in your mind to protect you from problems. Well, probably not a good psychological explanation. There's been a lot of criticism of Freud. But even if it were, even if that's why people believe in God, maybe that's how God gets people to believe in them. Maybe there is a God, and he has this need for a father figure, and that's how we develop. So it doesn't show that the belief in God is false. Okay, much more you could say about that, and about a lot of these. Okay, so homework, do two more modal arguments on page 247. These are our last two. After this, we're done with modal, except for the final, and we'll just do fallacies, and then give a review class, and then the final exam. So do two more arguments and do a bunch of fallacies and logical set R. At least part of that. At least start, maybe do a few problems. It's kind of hard. You gotta keep in mind you have little passages and you say what fallacy is committed, and you try to categorize it.